Can you believe that two U.S. military ships collided with each other, which resulted in one death and many others injured? How does that happen with all of the technology we have? Well, for one veteran, Monty Woodward, he still doesn't understand how it happens. And he was there, firsthand on the ship.
At sea, and this was back in '75. The USS Enterprise collided, not the Enterprise, Kennedy. The Kennedy collided with the Belknap, which was a cruiser. Well, here are some of the pictures. This is the Belknap before. Okay. You guys see that? And this is all that happened to the Kennedy. There was one guy get killed in that one because he was standing right by there where they collided. Well, this is what the Belknap looked like after the collision, after the fires, looking down.
So what happened? Like how does it happen that you collide with another ship?
Although this sad moment was one Monty will never forget, he also had many other experiences while serving for the U.S. Navy. This is Josie Farmer. Keep listening for more information. Monty's story began in Missouri, where he led a pretty normal childhood. He remembers singing about whether or not he would be drafted when he grew up. Because he grew up during the Vietnam War era, many young men were drafted as soon as they graduated high school. So when Monty turned 17, he graduated early and decided to enlist. Instead of him being drafted, he thought he would just join in the Navy so he wouldn't have to leave his family so suddenly. Back then, the draft was very harsh. They didn't give you a choice where you went or when you went. They just told you to leave. Although his parents would miss him, they didn't have harsh feelings about his choice because his father was also in the Navy. When he decided to enlist, he knew he needed to go to boot camp. Because of his dad, he knew how demanding it would be. As Monty was preparing for boot camp, there was a lot for him to do: swimming skills, giving up tobacco, and knowing the recruit information. Monty's first week of boot camp was tough, but he eventually figured it out. He had to pass quite a few tests by the end of the first week. Some tests he had to pass were the swimming, treading, jumping, and drown-proofing requirements. He had to know the introduction of marching skills, and he needed to know the classroom learning, rank, and rank recognition. After many grueling weeks of intense workouts, Monty finally graduated. He recognized that life wasn't all about messing around and that things actually had to be serious. Now that Monty was officially part of the Navy, it was time for him to begin his service. But what exactly does a person in the Navy do? A Navy man's main job is to fight at sea. They are composed of maintenance facilities at shore, auxiliary vessels, and warships. Also, at the beginning of the 20th century, ship-based airplanes. The earliest known navies were discovered in Greece in the 5th century BCE.
My specialty was I was an administrative specialist. And so I did a lot of admin work, but there was some times during my career I got to do some other things. When I was in Vietnam, I was assigned to a combat cargo for a while, and I was on board an amphibious assault ship, USS Incheon, and we were over there getting rid of the mines that we had put in there. We were into some treaty with the Vietnamese to get the mines out, and then they'd release POWs, and that's what we did. And I was part of the crew that rode helicopters for a while. And then I when I was on board that ship, the last part of my tour on there, I was working in engineering because I just wanted to try that out for a while. And when I got transferred from that ship, I went to another ship, destroyer, and I was working admin there. And I pretty much worked admin.
As Monty began his work, he saw many interesting things happening.
Just a lot was on the job. I remember my first helicopter ride. I didn't want to go. And when the Marines found out, they decided they're going to have fun with the sailor. And it was interesting, my first ride. After that, I didn't complain.
Do you remember anything else from your first ride? Like, what were the circumstances?
Well, I was told to go get on the helicopter, and I was like, some Marines that kind of escorted me out there, put me in there, and said something to the pilot, and I went for one wild ride.
How does fuel get transferred in the air? Fueling in the air is like transferring gas from a car 350 miles per hour. Instead of wasting time by landing to refuel on the ground, a military pilot can arrange to meet with a tanker plane along the way. Monty recalls how cool it was to watch this happen from the ground. Some things happened while Monty was in the Navy, some good and some bad. This next story was rough for Monty. He never knew how harsh a ship crash could be. It was nighttime, and almost everyone was asleep. No one knew that the ship tied up to them would crash and catch on fire just because of one simple accident. Right now, it was already hard enough for Monty because he had just found out his son was born and wouldn't get to see him for 2 more weeks.
At sea, and this was back in '75. The USS Enterprise collided, not the Enterprise, Kennedy. The Kennedy collided with the Belknap, which was a cruiser. Well, here's some of the pictures. This is the Belknap before. Okay. You guys see that? And this is all that happened to the Kennedy. There was one guy get killed in that one because he was standing right by there where they collided. Well, this is what the Belknap looked like after the collision, after the fires, looking down.
So what happened? Like, how does it happen that you collide with another
Well,
ship?
it was at nighttime, and you got people that are on deck, driving the ships.
Yep.
Somebody made a mistake, and the flight deck basically cut off this part of the ship, the superstructure. And you got your boilers and your boiler stacks. It just started pumping the fuel back in, and it was caught on fire then. And you can see how close our ship was to them. This was our ship. We were on this ship, and we were tied up next to the Belknap as it was exploding and on fire.
Wow.
And fighting fires and getting people out of the water and trying to save lives. And that's what the Belknap looked like after it was all over with.
This was a hard time for everyone. It was hard to believe one accident could cause a crash like this. Just like everything, though, after a while, Monty moved on with his life and continued his work in the Navy. Monty's main job in the Navy was more on the administrative side of things. His job was technically called an administrative specialist, so he spent most of his days carrying out administrative work. However, during Vietnam, he left his post and was assigned to help with combat cargo. After the Vietnam War, he found that he was in another appealing job called Operation Praying Mantis. The main point of Operation Praying Mantis was to sink the Iranian SAM-class frigate Sabalan. They needed to sink the ship because the Iranians were in the mines and leaving with the mines. Navy divers recovered other mines whose serial numbers matched the ones found aboard the Iranian mine layer, Iran Ager, several months earlier. Planning for the retaliation, which was dubbed Operation Praying Mantis, began immediately, and 3 groups of U.S. warships were assembled in the Gulf on the morning of 18 April, 4 days after the mining. They were ready to strike, says NavyBook.com.
It was Operation Praying Mantis.
Being in the military impacts a person's life. For Monty, most were good impacts, but some may have been tragic. Some big impacts on Monty were that he became a man and grew up with the people he worked with. He learned how to be mature with these people because of how hard he got pushed. Monty's most memorable moment was when he was awarded chief. Monty also got many awards, including the Vietnam Service Medal, Republican Vietnam, Good Conduct, and National Service Medal. He was honored to get all of these medals. The one thing that Monty misses the most is how close he got to some of his Navy soldiers. He missed the togetherness. Monty also misses the traveling. While he served, he was able to see a lot of unique cultures and foreign cities. The one place Monty would love to revisit one day was his old base in Alaska. This base sits on its own island, which is actually called Adak Island. Monty misses how beautiful life was when waking up to the view there. Today, Monty spends his time volunteering for the chaplain at City Council in Nevada. From time to time, he still gets texts from some of his old military friends. I'd like to thank Monty for serving and letting me take up some of his time to tell me about his story. This is Josie Farmer, and thanks for watching.